The conference room was shrouded in darkness, save for a narrow band of golden light slicing in from the city window. Ethan pressed his back against the icy glass, every beat of his heart pounding into the tense silence suspended between them. Charlotte stood close, so close that her parted lips, her eyes brimming with desire and recklessness, seemed to dare someone to cross a line that shouldn't be crossed. Outside, the sharp click of high heels echoed along distant marble floors, threatening, tempting, sending a jolt of adrenaline through the cramped room. The air between them was thick, saturated with forbidden longing, with the remnants of her perfume still lingering on his collar. Charlotte's fingers traced lightly over Ethan's wrist, so soft, trembling, yet bold in their defiance. "Someone's about to come in," Ethan whispered, his voice hoarse. Charlotte smiled, a dangerous, knowing smile. "Maybe that's why you can't look away from me." The door handle turned ever so slightly. Instantly, both of them froze. In that suspended moment, everything seemed to contract. Their secret, the risk, that wild, barely suppressed hunger. Everything hanging by a thread, as if discovery was just one breath away. Ethan shut his eyes, forcing himself not to pull her into his arms, not to let go and surrender to the consequences. Instead, his mind reeled back to how it all began, to that day Charlotte walked into his life. The staccato of high heels, those unreadable, icy eyes, her name gleaming on the conference room door. Back then, it had all seemed so simple. The conference room was still steeped in silence after the door had suddenly swung open. Ethan held his breath, acutely aware of Charlotte pressed so close to him, their bodies separated by nothing more than a single breath. The sound of footsteps faded down the hallway, heels clicking and then growing distant. Slowly, the tension in the room eased, leaving only the dim, golden glow of the overhead light splashed across the floor, their tangled shadows stretching across the glass behind them. It took Ethan a few seconds to steady himself, unable to look Charlotte in the eye. They could both hear their hearts pounding wildly, as if just one wrong movement would shatter the fragile secret they'd been holding. In that tense moment, Ethan couldn't help but think, how far have we already gone? It had all started just 4 weeks earlier. Ethan Parker, a guy from a small town in Indiana, had only recently moved to New York. After nearly 2 years juggling short-term contracts, he'd finally landed a permanent job at Evan Media, a well-known digital media corporation with its headquarters perched high on the 34th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. For Ethan, it was the dream he'd always chased. A steady paycheck, a professional environment, a real shot at changing the fate of his family still struggling back home. On his first morning, Ethan had still been fumbling with a suit that wasn't quite ironed, a tie knotted too hastily. The modern office that opened before him was a whole new world. Glass walls sparkling with city lights, desks arranged in islands, rows of green plants, a high-end coffee machine, even a long snack bar for the staff. It left him both excited and overwhelmed, determined not to let himself stand out among the 100 unfamiliar faces. From the very start, Ethan promised himself he would keep to himself, stay out of office gossip, steer clear of small talk in the pantry each morning, and absolutely never get tangled up in any personal drama involving coworkers, let alone the boss. He reminded himself daily, just do your job, don't draw attention, hit your targets by year's end, and that's enough. But everything changed one Wednesday afternoon, the day the new project was announced. The whole company crowded into the main hall. everyone buzzing to hear the CEO himself introduce the special hire, who would lead Evan Media's strategic project for the year. No one expected the new face to be a young woman with shimmering chestnut hair, a slender but confident figure. She wore a dark suit, her stride strong and steady, her cold gaze sweeping the room and lingering just a moment too long on Ethan's spot, as if by accident, but not quite. Charlotte Evans, the CEO said proudly, graduated with honors from the London School of Economics, just returned home and agreed to join us as project manager for Digital Next Gen. You may call her Charlotte or Charlie. The hall broke into a hush of whispers. Someone leaned over and murmured, "That's the boss's daughter." A few exchanged glances, part admiration, part wariness. Ethan swallowed hard, struggling to keep his face neutral when Charlie's eyes found him. A faint smirk at the corner of her lips leaving him, so flustered he had to look away. That very day, Ethan received an email transferring him to the new project team. His direct supervisor, none other than Charlotte Evans. The reason given: need more creative staff who thrive under pressure. In reality, Ethan knew no one in this company would ever dare say no to the boss's daughter, especially when she just returned after years abroad. In the early days working with Charlotte, Ethan kept his distance as much as possible. She was icy in meetings, rarely friendly or approachable. Yet he soon noticed that beneath the frosty exterior was a pair of deep, defiant eyes, burning with something stubborn and unyielding. Once, Ethan caught Charlotte standing alone in the hallway, quietly gazing down at the stream of cars below. New York's lights reflected in her eyes like the whole world was spinning, except for her. He almost asked if she was all right, but stopped himself. Gradually, Ethan realized Charlotte wasn't entirely as the rumors painted her. At work, she was fiercely intelligent, direct, demanding high performance but always fair. Outside of work, she gave nothing away, never mixing with coworkers, never at parties or even the Friday happy hour. That separation only made everyone more curious and left Ethan with a growing urge to uncover the real person behind the mask. One Friday night, after the office had emptied out, Ethan was still hunched over his laptop, tweaking a presentation for a crucial meeting the next day. The hallway lights were off, just the pale glow of his monitor lighting the room. He was about to head out when he heard the softest footsteps outside the door. Charlotte appeared, paper coffee cup in hand, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. "Is someone still here?" she asked, looking at Ethan but seemingly only half aware of his presence. He nodded, trying to hide how flustered he felt. "Just fixing some things that didn't feel right," Ethan muttered, embarrassed. Charlotte leaned against the desk, a faint smile on her lips. "You're the only one who's never taken a single day off since you joined. Careful, you might burn out." It was a simple remark, but it made Ethan blush. That girl, the boss's daughter, his direct manager, was speaking to him for the first time outside the rigid lines of work. In the dim glow of the empty office, even a brief exchange felt like something had shifted, just a little closer than before. From that night, Ethan and Charlotte started sharing more subtle interactions. A work email with an extra line checking on his health, a random moment together at the coffee machine, or a surprising meeting of eyes during an online call with overseas partners. Each time, Ethan's heart would race, his mind spinning, unsure if he was just curious or if it was something more. As for Charlotte, she always maintained her cool, but in rare, unguarded moments, her eyes seemed to reveal so much more than words ever could. Things soon slipped out of control as the project entered its final, high-pressure phase. The whole team worked late nights, buried under deadlines and an endless barrage of management emails. One night, as the clock neared 11 p.m., only Ethan and Charlotte remained in the conference room on the 34th floor. The silence was so deep they could hear each other's breathing, the faint clatter of keys echoing in the space. Ethan was focused on a spreadsheet when Charlotte suddenly spoke, her voice low and rough. "Do you ever feel trapped here?" Ethan froze, unsure if she was joking or truly confiding. He replied softly, "Sometimes I think this job is like a golden cage. Everything's dazzling, but it's just another way to keep us locked in." Charlotte smiled, a real gentle smile for the first time, her eyes losing their usual guard. In that moment, Ethan realized the distance between them was gone. No longer boss and subordinate, no longer boss's daughter and small-town boy. Just two lonely souls, sharing the glow of a city that sparkled far beyond the glass. Before he could think what to say next, the conference room lights snapped off, triggered by the building's automatic system. The room was left with only the faint, shimmering haze of the city outside. Charlotte let out a soft laugh, her voice playful in the darkness. "Looks like everything's conspiring to keep us here tonight." They stood side by side, the darkness a veil thrown over all the rules and boundaries. Ethan trembled, not from the cold, but from a wild new emotion rising in his chest. Excitement, longing, fear all tangled together. He could hear Charlotte's breathing, feel the heat of her body only inches away. Just then, footsteps echoed outside the door. Charlotte squeezed his wrist, whispering, barely audible, "Someone's coming." They froze, holding their breath. In that suspended moment, Ethan realized nothing would ever be simple again. The line between reason and emotion, right and wrong, safety and danger, had all blurred in the space of a single night. That night became a milestone Ethan would never forget. From then on, every encounter with Charlotte felt like the world was conspiring against them, and that danger only made it harder to look away. The question haunted Ethan: if we're discovered, will I lose everything? Or lose myself by never living honestly? And in that relentless whirlpool, the secret meetings, the glances that broke every rule, the fleeting touches that burned with forbidden fire. These began to weave a dangerous habit that neither of them could give up. The next day, the office atmosphere seemed unchanged. People bustled back and forth, the clatter of keyboards filled the air, and Monday morning reports piled high on every desk. Only Ethan knew that every time he passed by Charlotte's workstation, whether by accident or on purpose, his heart skipped a beat. She remained cool and composed, posture straight, sharp eyes locked on her computer screen. Yet sometimes, in fleeting, stolen moments, their eyes would meet. And in that instant, every sound, every light seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them lost amid the crowd. Joint meetings now felt like a delicious but dangerous challenge. Charlotte was a master of emotional control. Nothing ever slipped past her expression, except, perhaps, her eyes lingering on Ethan for a heartbeat longer than necessary, enough for him to understand that what was between them had gone far beyond late-night work sessions. Every afternoon, as sunlight slipped away across the tower's glass windows, Ethan found himself drifting near the pantry, the spot where Charlotte always stopped for coffee. Every time, their conversations were the same routine small talk, yet their hands would inevitably brush when reaching for the milk or accidentally setting cups down at the sink. Each touch felt like a silent invitation. The more they tried to avoid it, the more impossible it became. The turning point came during the team leader's small birthday party on Friday night. The entire project group gathered at the rooftop bar. The atmosphere was lively, music pulsed, laughter and golden light played over bright, smiling faces. Ethan sat in a quiet corner, glass in hand, watching as Charlotte chatted with a group of female colleagues. Every now and then, she'd glance his way, a slight, challenging smile playing at her lips. After a while, Charlotte slipped away from the group, quietly making her way to the balcony out back, where the city lights cast a soft orange glow across her shoulders. Ethan couldn't help himself, he followed. The terrace was empty, night wind swirling. Charlotte leaned against the railing, eyes wandering out over the sea of twinkling lights. "This city is so beautiful at night, isn't it?" As she asked, her voice softer, lower than usual. Ethan stood beside her, drawing in a breath of cool air. "Some things are only beautiful from a distance. Up close, everything seems messier than you'd think." Charlotte let out a tired laugh. "Just like us, huh?" Those words made Ethan freeze. He looked at her, and in that moment, all the rules and prying eyes melted away. Only the truth remained. They wanted each other, even though they knew it was wrong. Charlotte turned to face him, her gaze bright with challenge, as if to ask, "Are you brave enough?" Ethan didn't answer. But when she set her cold hand on his wrist and gently pulled, they fell into a quick, hungry kiss right there under the pale golden lights and distant thump of music. That kiss lasted only seconds, but in that fleeting instant, the world stopped. Ethan tasted both sweetness and danger on Charlotte's lips. They pulled apart almost immediately, breathing hard, staring at each other as if they'd just crossed an unforgivable line. "Did anyone see?" Ethan whispered, still trembling from the aftershocks of that kiss. Charlotte smiled, her voice deep and husky. "I don't care. If you're scared, then stop right now." Ethan didn't answer. Inside, the music swelled. People began calling their names. Charlotte smoothed her blouse, fixed her hair, put her icy mask back on, and walked inside ahead of him, leaving Ethan alone with his heart pounding wildly. After that night, nothing was the same. Ethan found himself addicted to the thrill of secrecy. The glances exchanged in meetings, Charlotte's sly smile when she handed him special assignments. They started messaging each other through company email, using coded phrases, innuendo, sometimes even bold provocations only the two of them understood. Once, during a long meeting, Charlotte quietly slid a folded note toward Ethan. Just a few words, 11 p.m. storage room. That night, Ethan was so nervous he could barely work. When the clock struck 11, he slipped down to the basement storage room. The space was dim, lit only by a single yellow bulb and the scent of old paperwork. Charlotte was already there, draped in a long coat, hair falling loose to veil half her face. She pulled him close, whispering, "No one pays attention down here." Her hand skimmed his chest, lips tracing his neck, breath hot against his skin. Ethan reeled, trembling from both pleasure and the fear of being caught. Charlotte's fingers drifted down to his waistband, waking a wildness he'd never dared show at work. They held each other tight, exchanged hurried kisses, surrendering to both boldness and recklessness, fully aware of how close to danger they were skating. When the soft clank of a metal door echoed from somewhere in the corner, Charlotte instantly stepped back, pulling her coat tight, giving Ethan a look filled with both satisfaction and mischief. "I like this feeling," she whispered. "It makes everything feel so alive." Ethan watched her disappear behind the filing cabinets, his heart still hammering in his chest. He knew that after tonight, He was no longer in control over his feelings, his desire, or the dread that one day everything would come to light. The days that followed swept them deeper into a vortex with no escape. They covered faint hickeys on their necks, maintained poker faces around everyone else, and only dared exchange cryptic, loaded messages during tense work hours. The sense of danger mounted as colleagues started noticing odd things. Someone even joked about Ethan's late hours or why Charlotte seemed to give him more tasks than anyone else. Every night, as the city glowed gold beneath the windows, Ethan replayed that moment on the rooftop, where all boundaries had been broken by a single kiss. And he knew, from here on out, the forbidden game between him and Charlotte had only just begun. The weekend slipped by in a haze of sudden summer rain and muggy June weather. Ethan spent most of his time at home, yet his thoughts never strayed far from Charlotte. Their short, suggestive messages kept coming. Sometimes it was a random link about the art of secret office kisses. Sometimes a photo of Charlotte's high heels left on her desk late at night with a teasing note. Guess who was here after midnight? On Monday morning, Ethan arrived at the office earlier than usual, hoping for a quiet moment to finish his report. But as soon as he sat down, an email from Charlotte popped up. 8:30. Server room. He reread the message, heart pounding. The server room was rarely used, especially this early. Without hesitation, Ethan shut down his screen and quickly left his desk. The corridor leading to the server room was eerily silent. Only the low hum of air conditioning and a greenish glow from the overhead lights bouncing off cold, white walls. Charlotte was waiting for him, leaning against a rack of equipment, hair falling loose, a thin white shirt hinting at her figure, eyes blazing with hunger. "Close the door," she whispered. As the door shut, it felt like the whole world narrowed down to just the two of them. Charlotte stepped forward, both hands slipping up to Ethan's collar, drawing him close. They crashed into each other with desperate need, a kiss scorching and deep, fueled by days of pent-up longing. Their breath mingled, hot and uneven, mingling with the drone of the server fans, Charlotte's fingers sliding beneath Ethan's shirt to feel every tense muscle trembling with anticipation. Ethan gripped her waist, pulling her tight against him. They kissed with reckless abandon, pausing only to listen for footsteps in the hallway, every pause, every small sound making their hearts race even faster. For the first time, Ethan realized just how intoxicating the risk, the secrecy, the sense of being hunted made every touch that much more electric. They only left the room when they were certain no one was around. Charlotte smoothed her hair, adjusted her blouse, eyes meeting Ethan's in a silent warning. "We need to be more careful." Ethan could only nod, still shaking from the rush of pleasure mixed with fear. From that day on, their lives grew more dangerous. By daylight, they kept their distance, even acting cold in meetings. But every fleeting glance, every accidental brush of fingers in the elevator or at the communal counter, every coded message sent from under the table, every quick sideways look, each was enough to make Ethan's heart leap. Once, during a coffee break, Ethan was standing by the espresso machine when Charlotte came over. To the rest of the office, they were just boss and employee. But when the others turned away, Charlotte leaned in close, her hand gliding across Ethan's lower back, whispering, "Tonight." 10 o'clock, parking garage. The basement parking lot was a forbidden zone for anything private. But for Ethan and Charlotte, it was a sanctuary for their secret, a world apart from the strict routines of corporate life. That night, after everyone else had left, Ethan crept down to the garage. The yellow lights were dim, the air cold and still, every sound amplified by emptiness. Charlotte waited, leaning on her black SUV. As Ethan approached, she pulled him to her, lips gliding to his neck, arms circling his shoulders. Without words, they fell into each other, breaths growing fast, echoing through rows of silent cars. Every hurried hug, every stolen kiss, every hand sliding under clothes burned away any trace of right or wrong. Suddenly, the door to the garage swung open. They sprang apart, frantically straightening themselves. A security guard strolled by, barely glancing their way before moving on. Charlotte shot Ethan a mischievous smile, whispering close to his ear, "I think we just broke our own record for being reckless." Ethan squeezed her hand, unable to say a word. All he knew was the further they went, the less he could stop. As days passed, their secret meetings grew more frequent and more daring. Sometimes it was a quick midday rendezvous on the rooftop, just them and the sound of wind and distant machinery. Sometimes it was slipping personal photos inside work files or trading flirty, blush-inducing messages in the middle of tense days. They were caught up in a game with no exit. The greater the risk, the deeper the addiction, the more they tried to hide, the wilder it became. Ethan began to notice a few colleagues getting suspicious. "Why are you always leaving so late?" Someone joked. "You look different these days. Is something going on with the boss?" Ethan would just laugh it off, but inside, worry grew. Meanwhile, Charlotte seemed even bolder, as if testing just how far they could go. One afternoon, right in the middle of a busy workday, Charlotte sent Ethan a close-up photo of her lips with a message. "Tonight I want to try the glass elevator." Reading it made Ethan's whole body burn, heart pounding out of control. That night, they met in the glass elevator when the building was nearly deserted. The doors closed, just the two of them, surrounded by city lights and cool white glare. Charlotte stepped in, kissing Ethan softly, hands traveling down his waist, her breath short and urgent. Ethan responded, arms locking her close, not caring if a camera caught it all. They lost themselves in that small space, bodies pressed together, every moment of danger only feeding the fire between them. When the elevator reached the last floor, they quickly straightened their clothes, composed their faces, and walked out side by side as if nothing had happened. But as Ethan walked down the hallway to his desk, it struck him. His life now revolved entirely around Charlotte. Her messages, her kisses, her secret touches, every bold risk they took. He was exhilarated, terrified, and left wondering what tomorrow would bring if someday all of it was exposed to the harsh light of day. The early days of July in New York were always stifling, hotter and more oppressive than Ethan had ever imagined back in Indiana. But to him, that heat was nothing compared to what was burning inside, the forbidden longing, the breathless anticipation every time Charlotte appeared anywhere near his line of sight. Work at Evan Media entered a fever pitch. Reports piled up, meetings dragged on endlessly, pressure from the board escalated every day. But for Ethan, what kept him up at night wasn't looming deadlines. It was the feeling of being watched, every step shadowed. Every glance from colleagues, every casual remark about Charlotte, every time someone teased, "Getting close to the boss lately, huh?" left him breaking out in a cold sweat. One rainy Wednesday evening, Ethan received a strange message from an unknown number. "Be careful, someone's watching you and her." Just a single line, but it sent his heart into a free fall. He glanced around the office. Everything seemed normal, but he felt the distant, suspicious eyes behind computer screens. Ethan's mind spun. Who sent this? What did they know? And most of all, if their secret was exposed, would everything unravel in an instant? He almost messaged Charlotte but stopped himself. Fear and longing tangled inside him, making him dizzy. Yet that very sense of living on the edge of discovery only made it harder to stop. That night, Charlotte called him from a private number, her voice low and rough. "Can you come up to the rooftop now?" Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his jacket and took the elevator to the building's top floor. Outside, the rain was still pouring down, wind howling through the steel bars. Charlotte stood by the railing, shoulders trembling beneath a thin veil of rain, hair plastered to her cheek. When she saw Ethan, she just smiled softly, her eyes wild but uncertain. Without a word, Charlotte pulled him close, slipping out of her soaked jacket, leaving only a tight dress clinging to her body, speckled with raindrops. She pressed her lips to his, and this time there was no hesitation, no distance, only burning need and the terrifying sense that maybe this is the last time. Ethan gripped her tight, pulling her into his body. His hands slid under the thin dress, feeling every inch of skin cold and shivering from the rain. They collided in the open rooftop air, the city below nothing but a sea of blurred lights, the world deaf to their ragged breaths, the soft gasps, the sound of bodies tangled in reckless abandon. Every touch, every kiss tasted of rain and danger. Ethan's hands explored every curve beneath the clinging dress, Charlotte arching into him, lips seeking out every sensitive spot, hands diving boldly under his shirt to pull him closer, closer, close enough they felt they might become one. They lost all sense of time and place, every second another roll of the dice. If anyone came up to the rooftop, if a security camera was still running, if a single guard appeared, everything would be over in a heartbeat. But in that moment, they didn't care. The more forbidden the love, the more frenzied and blazing it became. When exhaustion finally claimed them, they lay together beneath a narrow shelter, breath still coming hard, warmth mingling with the chill of New York rain. Charlotte curled an arm over Ethan's chest, whispering, "Do you regret any of this?" Ethan stared up at the clouded sky, feeling her heart beat against his side. He shook his head, whispering back, "I'm only afraid of losing you. Or losing everything." Charlotte laughed, a sound that was half tears, half rain. "If you had to choose, which would you pick?" Ethan was silent for a long time. He knew this affair had already gone far beyond any line he'd ever imagined. On one side, reputation, career, a future. On the other, the woman in his arms, the one who made him feel alive, even if it was only in the darkness and in the shelter of silent rain. In the days that followed, the pressure only grew. At meetings, colleagues' eyes grew sharper, rumors buzzed through the office. Someone asked outright, "You and Evans seem pretty close these days, huh?" Ethan could only force a laugh, trying to brush it off. But alone in his office, his heart pounded with every secret message from Charlotte. Midnight, storage room. Careful people are paying attention today. That night in the dark storage room, they didn't dare take the same risks as before. They only held each other tight, hands clasped, feeling each other's breath, warmth, and the fear that now hovered over them. Charlotte pressed her head to his chest, murmuring, "If everything falls apart, I'll be the first to take the blame." Ethan pulled her closer, kissing her hair. "No, I won't let you stand alone." The tension reached its peak when one day, the company email system was suddenly hacked. Rumors about an improper relationship between the project manager and a male employee, spread everywhere. Cryptic messages, blurry photos, even a secretly recorded clip from the parking garage. All of it hung over Ethan and Charlotte like knives waiting to fall. The company called an emergency meeting. The atmosphere was tense. Charlotte sat at the head of the table, cold and proud, but Ethan noticed her fingers trembling under the table. When the CEO, Charlotte's father, entered the room, the air froze. Ethan felt the heavy, suspicious stare of his boss, as if he could see through every disguise. Is there anything anyone would like to explain about these rumors? The CEO asked, voice calm but edged like a blade. No one spoke. Ethan sat frozen, body ice cold, while Charlotte lifted her chin, staring straight at her father, not backing down. The meeting ended in deadly silence. Outside, Ethan found Charlotte standing in the hallway, face pale, but eyes still defiant. She squeezed his hand tightly, gathering courage, whispering, "We have only one choice left: face this together or walk away." Ethan gazed deep into her eyes, knowing there was no going back. Their forbidden love had reached the final edge, one wrong step, and everything would go up in flames. But deep inside, he knew he could never let Charlotte go, never give up the feeling of being truly alive, even if it meant burning for just one more night in the darkness. Rumors about the inappropriate relationship between Charlotte and Ethan spread through Evan media like a storm, racing through every floor and corner. The stares that followed them became more brazen, half-joking, half-serious whispers echoing from the pantry, the elevator, even the restrooms. The harder Ethan tried to act normal, the more isolated and suffocated he felt, trapped in a web of suspicion. Charlotte maintained her usual composure, cold and proud, but Ethan could see the deep anxiety in her eyes. Each time she walked down the hallway, Charlotte seemed to bring a chill with her. No one dared come close. But Ethan knew that underneath that facade, she was just as frightened as he was. That night, after a long, pressure-filled day, Charlotte sent Ethan a single message. "Come to my apartment now. No need to reply." Ethan arrived at her building just as the city lights were flickering on, his heart a jumble of worry and longing. He climbed the stairs to the top floor, every step counting the wild, uneven rhythm of his heartbeat. Charlotte opened the door, no makeup, hair loose, wrapped in a thin sweater that clung to her delicate figure. The soft, yellow glow of the lamp painted her skin in honeyed light, yet there was a heaviness beneath it. Neither of them said a word. Charlotte pulled Ethan into the living room, shut the door with a slam, and clung to him as if letting go for even a second would make everything fall apart. They kissed deeply, desperately, pouring all their fear, pain, and unspeakable longing into each other after days of restraint. Ethan's hands trembled as he undressed her, savoring her warmth, every soft curve, every gasp as if they were blending together for the last time. Charlotte welcomed him with all her pent-up passion, the quiet moans in her throat tearing through the suffocating silence of her apartment. They lost themselves in each other, forgetting the outside world, the lurking danger, until there was nothing left but two burning bodies and a silent promise. No matter how this ends, tonight we belong to each other. After that feverish climax, they lay together in silence. Charlotte turned her back to him, watching the city lights glitter outside the window. Ethan wrapped his arm around her, whispering, "Tomorrow, nothing will be the same. If you want to stop, I'll be the one to leave. I can't let you get hurt anymore." Charlotte didn't answer immediately. She just placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beating next to hers. After a long moment, she shook her head gently. "I don't want to lose you, but I don't want you to lose everything because of me. For the first time in my life, I know what it is to be afraid." Ethan pressed a soft kiss to her shoulder, murmuring, "Then let me share the burden with you. If we must pay the price, let it be both of us, not just one." The next morning, Ethan left early, before the city was fully awake. He walked along the empty avenue, mind spinning with the choices waiting ahead. If the company investigated to the end, he knew he'd be the one to go, that everything he'd worked for would vanish. But just thinking of Charlotte's eyes, of her trembling embrace, made him unable to walk away from this game. That day, things only got worse. An anonymous email was sent to the entire executive board, accusing Charlotte of favoritism toward a male employee, including a blurry photo taken secretly in the parking garage. The board immediately called an internal meeting. Charlotte arrived with calm eyes and her head held high. Ethan was summoned to HR, where Mr. Evans, Charlotte's father, waited. He looked at Ethan for a long time, his eyes cold and suffocating. "Do you have anything to say about these rumors?" Ethan took a deep breath, meeting his gaze. "I'm willing to take responsibility for everything I've done. If necessary, I'll leave Evan Media." A flash of surprise crossed Mr. Evans's face, but he only nodded coldly and dismissed Ethan. Out in the hallway, Ethan found Charlotte waiting. She gripped his hand tightly, her eyes red but brimming with determination. "I'll talk to my father. No matter what, I won't let you take the fall alone." Ethan shook his head, giving her a gentle smile. "We'll face this together until the very end." That night, they met again in Charlotte's familiar apartment. There was no more frantic urgency, only a gentle, tear-filled night of confessions, love, and kisses stretched out as if trying to hold on to every last moment. Charlotte and Ethan made love slowly, savoring every second as if there might be no tomorrow. They shared childhood memories, loneliness, half-formed dreams, and the fear of being lost. Together, they laughed and cried, sinking into each other in a world meant for those who love too fiercely. When the first light of dawn crept in through the window, Ethan realized he had never felt so alive, even knowing that a single wrong choice could destroy everything. Charlotte held him tight, whispering in his ear, "If I had to choose between you and everything else, I'd choose you." Ethan closed his eyes, letting her warmth seep into him, ready to face any consequence, just to hold on to this forbidden love. The first dawn after that fateful night slipped by in an unusual silence. Ethan sat by the window in Charlotte's apartment, watching New York slowly brighten in the distance, his heart heavy with everything that was waiting ahead. He knew that from this moment on, there would be no more hiding. Back at the office, the atmosphere was colder than ever. Curious, pitying, even hostile glances followed Ethan everywhere. His inbox overflowed with rumors, anonymous messages, and that thick, loaded silence from his colleagues. But Ethan wasn't afraid anymore. He was ready to face whatever came. That very morning, an emergency meeting was called. Charlotte entered with her usual proud bearing, her eyes red but dry. Her father, CEO Evans, sat at the head of the table, his face severe and emotionless. No one spoke until he finally broke the silence. "Charlotte, Ethan, do you have anything to explain to the board?" Without hesitation, Charlotte rose. Her voice was low, steady, echoing in the crowded room. "We love each other. We know this violates company policy, but neither of us regrets it. If someone must be held responsible, let it be me alone." Ethan squeezed her hand tightly, refusing to let Charlotte face it alone. "No, Mr. Evans. I take full responsibility as well. If I have to leave Evan Media, I accept that, but I will never regret loving your daughter." The room was frozen. A few leaders shook their heads, whispering among themselves. CEO Evans stared at them for a long time, pain and disappointment mixing in his eyes. After a long silence, he stood up, his voice breaking with emotion. "I was her father before I was the CEO of this company. I'm disappointed you didn't trust us enough to be honest from the start. But I understand, there are things in this world that simply can't be controlled. You must accept responsibility to the company, but first, live true to your hearts." The decision was swift. Ethan was to leave Evan Media. Charlotte was suspended indefinitely, pending internal investigation. News spread through the media industry overnight, bringing a wave of gossip, malice, and viral headlines all over social media. The days that followed were the darkest for both Ethan and Charlotte. Ethan packed up his things in utter silence, every lingering glance from coworkers cutting into him like a knife. Charlotte shut herself away in her high-rise apartment, phone off, social media silent. Ethan wanted to comfort her, but he too was tormented, wondering if he destroyed everything Charlotte had built over the years for a love that was never allowed. But every time he saw her steady gaze, felt the way she clung to him, Ethan knew. Even if the world turned its back, as long as they had each other, they could begin again. There were nights they simply held each other, wordless, feeling every breath and every tear on each other's shoulders. Other nights, they loved each other wildly, as if it might be the last time, no tomorrow, no past, no need for a future. A few weeks later, Charlotte made her decision to leave New York. She refused every apology, every offer of help from her family, even her father's calls. Ethan saw her off at the airport. The two of them stood quietly amid the rushing crowd, hands held tight, lips meeting one last time before the security gate split them apart. "I'll wait for you," Ethan whispered, voice trembling. Charlotte smiled through her tears. "I know. If we can survive this, then nothing else matters." Her plane took off, leaving Ethan in the vast terminal, heart empty, but carrying a fragile thread of hope. A year passed. On a golden autumn afternoon, Ethan received a letter from a small city in Europe. Charlotte wrote about her new job, her peaceful life with no scandal, evenings spent by the window reading, and the memories of New York, of a love that had nearly been torn apart by the world. At the end, she wrote just one line, "I still love you like the very first day. If there's still a chance, will you come to me?" Ethan looked out at the pale autumn sky, feeling a gentle but fierce longing rise inside. He folded the letter, smiling, a soft, deep smile that meant more than any promise. That night, for the first time in months, Ethan packed a suitcase. He stood before the mirror, tightening his familiar tie, seeing in his eyes the determination and excitement of the young man he'd once been. The first day he walked into Evan Media, the first time he dared to love and risk everything. The next morning, Ethan left his tiny apartment, rolling his suitcase to the door, pausing for a long moment as if to memorize every trace of the past. He didn't know what was waiting at the end of this journey, or if Charlotte would be there as she'd promised. But this time, he chose not to regret. Before closing the door, Ethan looked back one last time, smiling with a new sense of freedom. It's time to begin again. The plane soared into the endless blue sky. Somewhere in the rush of a small foreign airport, Charlotte looked up and caught sight of a familiar figure emerging from the crowd. Her eyes widened with happiness and disbelief. Her lips parted soundlessly, but she was already smiling before he could reach her. Ethan walked toward her, slow but sure, as if every forbidden line, Every old mistake, every ghost of the past faded in that one moment when their eyes met. No explanation was needed, no more fear. Because this time, they truly belonged to each other.